first.
Yeah, that's what she says. Is everybody ready? Good evening. Welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and have our adoption of the final budget meeting this evening. Commissioner Smith is out of town. He will not be joining us for this, so let's go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Commissioner Bussell, if you would say a prayer for us too, I would appreciate it.
Please join me if you wish. Our Heavenly Father, we ask your blessings on this meeting this evening, and we ask your blessings on the decisions that we make on a very important part of our jobs as county commissioners. Be with us, keep us close to you, give us your wisdom as we proceed, and we gratefully ask for all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Hutzinger.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Tonight is as indicated by the chair, it's the second of two required public hearings. If you'll recall, back at the beginning of June, we delivered a lot of pages to the Board of County Commissioners relative to this budget. That budget document allowed you and the public to see this budget from a variety of different angles. We had it by program, we had it by state funding category, we broke it down by fund. You went through the decision units, you went through the capital improvement program. You spent hours and hours and hours listening to departments and agencies that you fund. You even had a non-required public hearing back in June to give the community an opportunity to visit this budget early on in the process. And tonight is the culmination of the process because the county's fiscal year will begin on October 1. And according to state statute, you're required to have two public hearings in September, and this is the second of two. There are a number of steps we need to abide by. There will be a request for 4 separate resolutions tonight. The fourth one would be to adopt the capital improvement program that we took you through back in June. The total overall budget, as I indicated at the last meeting, is up by 0.5%. You have funded the biggest priorities in this community, and we and the community, I believe, are pleased with the amount of funding towards public safety. You still, as we've indicated during the summer, although 50,000 more people have moved into the county since the beginning of the recession, our revenues are still 18% below. Our property tax revenues are still 18% below what they were in 2007. So we struggle from a financial standpoint in dealing with the needs of an expanding community. But you have been wise in your decision-making relative to this budget. You have maintained the excellent, highest credit rating that the credit markets can afford. A AAA credit rating to the county's overall credit is a testament to the board's management of the public funds in this community. The tentative budget for 17 has been presented to you. We presented you with the proposed property tax rates, which would remain the same in the coming fiscal year as they are this year and as they have been for the last 10 years. We will hear from the public, and then we will ask you to adopt the budget, the millage rates, and the capital improvement program. I would be happy to answer any questions before I turn it over to Jan, who has some remarks before you hear from the public. If there's no questions, Jan?
Have anyone on the board? I do have a couple. I'm not sure, though, if we...
Yeah, I was going to wait until after Jan
Yeah.
was done, too, before I ask my questions.
You had mentioned, Ed, in your opening comments, you had talked about more than one resolution that we are... Did I understand you correctly?
Yes.
Because I'm only showing the one. That's why I'm asking.
You have in your agenda package on the second page an A, B, C, D, and then a fourth one under Roman numeral 8, adoption of the resolution R-16-144 for the CIP. Those are the listed resolutions the board needs to adopt. The first one would be the millage rate adoption. The second one would be a resolution to adopt the annual budget. Third would be a resolution for the special taxing districts within the county, and the fourth would be the CIP.
The reason I'm asking is because I have it pulled up on my screen, and I'm not showing all those, so I just wanted to make sure the public was aware that we had all those. All right, that's why I was asking.
That's quite all right.
Dan, go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. There's several steps that we need to do specifically in order by state statute, so if you bear with me, we will go through those orders. The first item of information is to describe the percentage of additional property taxes that will be generated by the growth in the tax base exclusive of the growth from new constructions. This is also referred to as the increase in revenue over rollback rate or amount. In the budget proposal of Manatee County before you, while the overall tax rates are not increasing, the aggregate increase over rollback percentage is 4.9%. The aggregate millage rate for FY17 is 6.8656, and the rollback aggregate rate is 6.5449. Highlighted changes within the budget have been duly noted within the budget message and subsequent updates. I'd like to go through the presentation briefly, if you will indulge me. In the first slide, this again highlights the taxable property values starting back with 2007 as the high water mark at that point. And you can see for the 2016 tax year, which is the upcoming FY17 year, we are back up to 30.6 billion. The millage rate has remained constant since 2008. It was dropped to 6.4 countywide millage rate and has remained at the same level the entire time. The countywide millages that you are voting on tonight, this is a comparison between FY16 adopted and the FY17, which at the current time is tentative, and you will vote on tonight. The countywide, including debt, 6.4326. The unincorporated MSTU, 0.6109, and the Palm Air MSTU at 0.2546. The slide before you now is the revenue by source. The FY17 net budget is $579 million. You can see by the layout which has been provided, property taxes account for 35% of all the revenues received. The next slide highlights the uses by function. And these are the state categories of function that we are required to categorize all items by. And if I may, general government, which holds the clerk of the courts, the tax collector, our governmental and administration, is at 14% of your budget. The largest piece is public safety at 28%. Public safety includes the sheriff, operation of the jail, ambulances, inspections, and code enforcement. You also have the physical environment at 27% is the second largest piece, and that involves the categories attributed to the utilities and landfill budgets, and also environmental programs. After that, public transportation is held at 8% of the budget. Human services, which are actually fundings for veterans, nonprofit agencies, and children's services are involved in there. Culture and recreation at 3%. Capital outlay within this budget is at 8%, and the other, which includes gas tax transfers to the cities, tourist development, remains at 8%. And that concludes the presentation. I do have one more item to say. As we move forward, the aggregate millage, again, for Manatee County Board of County Commissioners for the fiscal year 2016 and 17 is 6.8656, and the change from the rollback aggregate millage rate of 6.5449 for the operating millage is hereby determined to be 4.9%. Again, there is no increase in the overall tax rates.
Thank you, Dan. Come a long way since last year. All right, well, let's see, we might have some questions now. Commissioner Benak.
Yeah, just a couple of things I want to make sure that we make totally clear, since
Good idea.
it seems to be hard for some people to understand the budget as has been presented, because we routinely hear that we're running a deficit budget. I got an email this week that said, "Why are you running a deficit budget?" And I said, "We are not running a deficit budget. We have more revenues than we have expenses. That's not a deficit budget. We have a fund that provides revenues," but I want clarification on this, because I can say it and people shake their head no at me because they don't believe me. But I know what I'm talking about, and we're not running a deficit budget.
It's only a certain.
But you're the expert, so I will defer to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The way we provide this budget is for the most part laid out by state statute. The state dictates to all 67 counties the why-fors and the how-comes of how you present a budget, and you should not deviate from that. I did once years ago and got a letter from the Department of Revenue, said you had to have that public hearing all over again, just because we didn't follow the letter of the law. So, when we start off with our revenues, we state, in this budget process, we estimate how much money we will have left at the end of this fiscal year. And then we add what we estimate next year's revenues to be. And together they total up the total revenue. And then we look at all the expenditures and we recommend a budget to the board on the way of the expenditures. And then you deliberate that over the summer, as I discussed earlier. And typically, the expenditures are less than the expenses, the revenues, and the balance is what we call reserves. There is no deficit. The federal government can have a deficit. Local governments, state governments, we cannot have deficits. You have to take what you estimate to be the balance at the end of the year. And then to complicate things even further, if that isn't enough, we have, as I've indicated before, over 150 different funds to account for things. Not that we like to account for them that way, but again, state statute drives the requirement for these funds. And once you put money in those funds, you have to account for that money and the expenditures against it and the reserves that apply to it. When we say this is the county's budget, in reality, if we had the English majors in the room, this would be the county's budgets, because there's 150 funds roughly, and each one of them has to be balanced separately. Their revenues versus their expenditures, their reserves. And then we add all of those together to call the budget. But it is really a compilation of 150 different budgets that we total separately. We took you through the budget by fund back in June, fund by fund. Start the general fund, which is the largest. I'm not so sure it's the largest fund when you compare a utility system. But it is the one where the board has the most discretion about spending. You'll move on through funds, the unincorporated municipal services taxing unit. You'll go through the utility funds. There's multiple funds even within the utility system. You have the impact fee funds. You have the building department fund, the planning funds, on and on and on. We took you through every one of those funds. We showed you the anticipated revenue, the anticipated year-end balance this year. And the only thing we're sure of is that we're probably wrong, but you can't guess that number in advance, but we're pretty good at it. We've been doing it a while. And then we add to it the projected revenues we see coming in from the various sources in each fund. Then we have expenditures that we propose to the board, and then you'll have reserves. And then each one of those separately you went through. It's a tedious task. I know you've all sat through those. You gotta like this accounting business to go through all that. But it's a statutory requirement that you do that, and we present that information in such a way that it's required by the state, and the Government Finance Officers Associations evaluate the quality of the product that you adopt, and they have awarded your budget department a certificate in excellent in financial reporting and budget reporting for a number of years, because as a communication tool to the public, they have deemed your budget process to be meritorious. So to represent, I know it's a long story, to represent that we have a deficit budget is just wrong.
Okay, and in fact, we have reserves in excess of 20%, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we maintain a reserve of at least 20%, but in fact, we have an excess of that, and we try to make sure that we're keeping that because it's important for people that are looking at us in order to, do our bond rating. They want to make sure that we're fiscally responsible government. And apparently, we're doing that because we have a very high bond rating. That has not changed to the negative recently, has it, that I'm not aware of?
No. Your credit rating has been maintained during the recession. In fact, this board's credit rating went up during the recession because of how well you managed the resources during the recession. AAA rating by Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch are the highest ratings you can get. We have various credits within the county government. The utility system has its own credit. But the overall county credit is a AAA rated, and you can't go any higher.
And the net budget, that's the other one that seems to confuse people the most. We hear anywhere from, we have a budget of $2 billion to what I see in front of me, a net budget of $579 million. I know you explained it, Jan, a little bit, but in the interest of trying to help people to understand, could you go over that one more time, that why we don't really have a budget of $2 billion, as I've heard repeated?
Well, no. We are required by the state to report a budget in total of roughly $1.3 billion. But that requires us to count transfers, internal service funds. It requires us to count the reserves, the savings account, as I've described to folks around the community when I talk about this. If your Aunt Martha were to pass away and leave you $100,000, and you have a job that pays $50,000 a year, do you tell people that your annual budget is $150,000? I would think not. You don't count every year the same savings account. But the state makes us account for that each year in the budget. So we take all the reserves and all the funds, and we add that in. But for the purposes of what we can spend, you take out those reserves, you take out the transfers, you take out the internal service funds, and you get down to what we can actually spend, and that's the $579 million. That includes the spending side and the revenue side of those 150 funds.
So all of those funds are laid out. All of the revenues, as you said, all the transfers, everything has to be in this budget. As you said, the state makes us do it.
Yes,
So if
and it's
anyone
all
has
online.
questions, they can just review the budget that's online
Yes.
and understand it. Okay, thank you.
Or they could show up for all those fun meetings you had in the months of June and July. And
May, April,
it seems like the process never ends these days, but
amen.
Well, it's a good thing we start early, and we started early, which I really did appreciate, because we knew we had challenges, and we had a lot of things that were flagged, we had a lot of requests, so I did appreciate them, and I think it is kind of, we have people here that are looking for projects, we have many projects that people are looking for, so it is kind of almost a year-round thing where we're talking about the budget, because we know, kind of have an idea of what the projected revenues are gonna be, and we know what some of the demands are, so.
we've had that discussion over the years about the early, statutorily, a budget is to be delivered after the July 1 certification of property values by the property appraiser, and that budget needs to be submitted by July 15th. In the discussions we've had over the years, a budget this size needs to come earlier because you, the Board of County Commissioners, have to set the tentative millage rate no more than 45 days after July 1. Why the legislature didn't say August 4th, I don't know, but it's 45 days after July 1. And from July 15th to August 4th is not much time to deal with a budget this size. So we, at your direction, have provided you the budget much earlier than any county I'm aware of. And we present that budget to you either in very late May or early June in order to give you an adequate amount of time to walk through all those funds and all those reserves and revenues and decision units. And it's all been very public.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want you to carry something a little further than what you just did. The monies that we took for the flagged items.
Yes.
That we had. I think some people didn't understand the terminology that was used. I know you made the comment afterwards that we had taken money out of reserves. And basically what it was, we were up in revenue 15 million. So the monies for the flagged items, which specifically was mostly for the sheriff's department and public safety, actually didn't quote unquote come out of our reserves. It came out of the 15 million, part of the revenue that we were up for the year. Can you explain that, please?
That is one of those things, it's a case of semantics. You can
Yes.
say it however you want to look at it. This year, as indicated earlier, we had $15 million of additional revenue to the total overall budget, all 150 funds. We proposed expenditures in the $6 million range, and we proposed not spending the $9 million in order to build up the reserves.
Now, see, you're using it again, they're going to get confused
Well,
with the 20%.
we were going to build it up, but instead, you spent 1.2 of that remaining $9 million, new money, to fund public safety. It was the new money that came in out of the $15 million. We spent an additional 1.2 of that. And so the semantics, whether we put it in reserves and took it back out, or we just spent it and not built up as much reserves as $9 million, it turns out to be 7.8 million we used to replenish reserves.
Commissioner DiSabatino.
Thank you. With the referendums on the ballot in November, if the half-cent sales tax passes, then will we have workshops and forums of how, I know you have your list of what exactly we're going to fund and when, because the money's not going to come in all right away. So it's probably a year to accumulate before you can start your projects. Would that be correct?
Well, if the sales tax were to pass in November, you will start receiving money in January.
Right.
And you will receive money every month through the remaining 9 months of the year. And we project the revenue on an annual basis to be $30 million, and three-quarters of that, about $24-25 million, we'd actually collect during the year. And that would be available for you if you chose to amend the budget you're about to adopt tonight, or amend the capital improvement program, because remember, it is for capital. You couldn't take any of that money and fund any librarians or parks people, or they're for capital projects. So you could request an amendment to the capital improvement program after the first of the year in order to begin funding some of those projects that are on the list. Yes.
But we can't do it until the money comes in.
You can bond.
Well, you can have your budget hearing and you can appropriate money, you just can't spend it yet. You can't spend it till you get it, so it's, yeah. But, you can start looking at what is it that's on that list of 150 projects that doesn't require any right-of-way acquisition, doesn't require a whole lot of permitting. As I say in the
Sidewalks
capital
and Bay Shore.
improvement, capital improvement program, is it shovel-ready? If it's shovel-ready, and we can go do it, we could have a discussion about what is shovel-ready. You don't have to do any PD&E work, preliminary design engineering. We could do.
And then the other side of the coin, if it doesn't pass, then we have to start discussions for 18 of what we're going to be doing, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you finished?
Thank you.
Commissioner Benak.
And just want to follow up then on the process, because it is a capital fund, and so we have to go through a process to update the capital improvement plan. It would be a public process, plus we have a a review committee that would be weighing in on that, looking at that, and helping us to prioritize what the needs are from the list, right? I mean, isn't that the process?
That's correct. You have already adopted a resolution that upon the passage of the sales tax proposal on the ballot, you would appoint 7 members to the Citizens Oversight Committee, whose role would be to evaluate actions of this board and future boards to make sure that when you go to spend that sales tax money, that the projects you fund come off the list. And their report to the public would be, if you spent sales tax money, what did you spend it on? And to assure the public that it came off of the list. And that would all be put into place in short order. And then to amend the capital improvement program, I see my friend, the county attorney, in the back of the room. I think that has to be a public hearing to amend the capital improvement program.
Probably.
So that would be a public hearing to amend the capital improvement program to add projects that aren't currently in there and to describe how you're going to pay for them. And if that were to be with sales tax proceeds, you would have that public hearing, invite the public in to chat about it.
And at the same time, we could bring forward projects that are projects of record in the capital improvement plan, but don't necessarily have funding, right?
Yes.
Because it might be a possible funding source.
Anyone going to bring up this letter?
Commissioner
I think it's
Whitmore?
just a,
Well, and uses example like Robin just said about her district on Bay Shore Gardens with the sidewalks. I asked her, is that already in the plan, the proposal? And she said, yes. So trust me, the district commissioners, if this gets passed, will be looking at their projects that don't have all the limitations like Ed said, that we could actually start fairly quickly. And from what I understand, once we get this approved, the sales tax, then you're able to bond these projects to move faster at a certain point, right?
We could,
Take a loan if you want
you-
to, or you can wait years.
well, 44th is already funded with bond proceeds, and the debt service is going to be paid with other than the sales tax proceeds.
Right, I was talking about 44th, I know.
I heard that word
Yeah.
44th.
Yeah,
I want
no,
to make sure
no,
everybody
no.
understands. That's
No.
a
We
whole
have-
different way of going about
that's
it.
bond money out
The question of Bay Shore and sidewalks, I think you're going to see on an upcoming board meeting a budget amendment, because that can be funded through the tax increment financing district. So if those sidewalks are not on that list of 150 projects that we commit to out of sales tax proceeds, it's probably included in our proposals for funding out of the Southwest Tax Increment Financing District.
So you didn't answer the question about bonding, though. That was a great explanation, but.
But it didn't answer the question? I ramble. You have the ability, and you have the credit rating, that you can borrow money to move some of these projects along sooner. Now, the federal tax code requires governments to sign a certificate when you borrow money that you're going to spend the money in short order. Typically, it's a 3-year spend test.
Okay.
And if the project requires preliminary design and engineering, right-of-way acquisition, permitting, we've seen how long that takes with the Fort Hamer Bridge and other projects that don't think we're going to be rushing to the bond market
Okay.
during this upcoming fiscal year. There are a number of public safety projects that are in that list that don't require right-of-way acquisition, a whole lot of permitting. We could take care of some of those most critical public safety issues sooner rather than later.
Like I know there's issues at the jail,
Yes.
so I know that was a big one. And some of the others in public safety, like EMS, is there some? I don't have the list.
I don't either.
Okay.
If
But
I
remember there
remembered
was some-
everything on the list, you'd be so impressed, but.
Yeah, but there were some big projects at the jail. that-
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that we've been just Band-Aiding for years because we didn't have the
I'm sure my
funds.
friend Sheriff Stubbe back
Yeah.
there knows every one of those projects on the list.
Okay, good.
But, yeah, some of those we could be moving on quickly.
And the last question, the 578 million includes Port Manatee,
Yes.
That
At this
didn't
stage
mention.
of the game, we have to,
because I knew it was 568.
as a dependent district of the county, the port budget needs to be included, and it is roughly $11 million.
Yes.
So then
Please
it's-
explain to the public, though, that we do not, that does not come from taxpayer money. It's just a law that we have to include it.
right.
As a dependent district, their revenues and expenditures get included in this budget. None of those revenues come from property tax revenues or any tax revenue. That's revenues that they generate, and the expenses to run a port are charged to the port. And for budgetary purposes, that would, if I said 150 funds, you could say that 151.
I was just going to say, you should.
Well, you might
Well,
need to.
The port is one of
That a
those.
little bit. Go ahead,
I,
Betsy.
I always, every time I hear that it's no tax revenue, the fact of the matter is that we do benefit from taxes that come through the state, through DOT. You know, we had a port meeting this morning, and we had some great project discussions, large maintenance projects being done at the port, and the DOT is partnering with us at 75%, and that's your tax dollars. It just doesn't come ad valorem
Right.
through the county, but it is your tax dollars coming from.
Not county tax revenue,
Not county
it's
tax
state
revenue.
tax
Yes.
revenue.
Right.
Came from us.
And for those that are uninitiated, the state, for the most part, lives on sales tax revenue, and counties and cities live on property tax revenues.
Can I ask a question about that? Because
Yeah.
I want to make sure that people understand this. Because I was talking about sales tax revenue and how sales tax revenue doesn't 100% come to Manatee County, except for if we have this referendum and we get this additional half cent on the dollar. I don't want to confuse anyone. Everybody's so confused by what it really is, but it really is a half cent on the dollar. I think that's clear. If that were to pass, that would all stay entirely in Manatee County, where sales tax revenue does not, we don't get 100% of it? It goes to the state and some of it comes back? How does that work?
The state, in the total sales tax, currently, in this county, 6.5%. 6% goes to the state.
For the school?
Half
Yeah.
goes to the school board.
Yeah.
Out of that 6% that goes to the state, we have what we're referred to as a traditional half-cent sales tax, where they pass through, I'm not sure it's an exact calculation, a little fuzzy in my mind, but roughly a half of what percent they pass to us that we include in the general fund as other revenue. And then it's state shared revenues, and then we put the grants in there, and we put charges for services, but all of that totals up with the property taxes to fund the county's operating budget.
Yeah.
Gas taxes go into gas tax fund, they don't go into the general fund, they go into the transportation trust fund.
And I think that was why some people were confused when we had the projected ad valorem tax, what the property tax revenue was going to be versus what it actually was. We were a little bit off, but you had said that because of higher, I assume,
State.
sales tax, what came back to the state, that we were able to
Yes,
operate within what our projections were.
yes. From what we estimated when we provided you the budget at the beginning of June to what we finalized on that July 15th update, property tax revenues estimates were down, but other revenues were up, so the net effect was immaterial to the budget you were reviewing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I don't have anyone else on the board, so we'll go ahead and open to public comment. The first name that I have, it just says Sellers. How'd I know? Please state your name, sir, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Reverend MacArthur Sellers, President of the Eternity Temple CDC. And we're here tonight to, once again, request the board to consider us as we talk about the Bard Pit, the 88 acres. Now, it's a fact. If it's not in the plan, you're not going to get any action. And of course, we've talked about this, and I know we're on some lists.
You are.
More than one, actually.
Yeah.
Yes, you are. The
were
short
down
answer is,
before.
yes, you are. You're
Now
on
you
the
are.
list.
Yeah.
However, should the tax amendment be approved in November, I'm hoping that we will be considered for the project of the 88 acres. It's been a 15-year journey.
You can answer that.
With that, I'll turn it over to Elder Livingston, and we commend you. We commend you for the hard work you do. Thank you so very much. And I know we have some friends on the board.
Yes, you do.
Please keep us in mind. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and the Commission and friends. I'm a pastor and I also have a budget.
Could you please state your
And
name
I
for the
have-
record?
Oh, I'm Pastor Lawrence
Thank you.
C. Livingston, Eternal Temple Church. I have a board also responsible for my budget at the church, and we do have several streams of revenue. My wife Clifford and I, we have 5+ streams of revenue that comes in. We have to balance our budget at home. And I do hear some of the deliberations about how this budget came to pass. At the end of the fiscal year, we all tried to have a positive fund. And this part that Reverend Sellers is saying 15 years, actually, I've been working on this more than 20 years.
Yes, you have.
And may I say, with several commission groups prior to this. The Washington Park area, we believe, with your explanation about how the local taxes go to the state and then some come back, most of the people in our community think that when we pay taxes, we're supposed to get at least a certain portion of it back within the community, which it seems that the information I've been getting from individuals, that they don't see it coming back. There's very little coming back. We do have 2 sidewalks that just came in. I remember when we had dirt streets. I remember when we did not have 41 coming through by the hospital. In fact, when they built 41, before they opened the hospital, DeSoto Bridge, I used to sneak over so I can go to work early. And I've been at it that long. So we do want to know how soon our shovel-ready project, at least that portion that can be built on, how soon that can come about. If we can get an answer on that, that will really give us a spark of hope.
And hope, spark of hope.
If I might?
You're going to have to wait. Sorry. I was excited about this one. Reverend Livingston, you remember when we had our meeting?
Yes,
You remember what I said, right?
yes.
Well, we had a port meeting today, and I don't think Ed even knows about this yet. That's why I kind of cut in front of him.
I know.
Oh, you do? Okay. But it was discussed, and those 88 acres were discussed. And I'm going to turn it over to the chair of the port and let her tell you what was discussed today in the port meeting.
Yeah, and there was a meeting, and I briefly mentioned it to you when I came in, that there had been a meeting. Charlie Hunsicker and Dave Sanford from the port had met with Army Corps up in Jacksonville. And as you know, part of the project that we're trying to accomplish involves the dredging project that the Army Corps is doing, because we have a dredge spoil pile at the port, and we need to create capacity out of that spoil pile so that we can have, you know, future dredging projects. And Army Corps is taking that on. That is their project. And they have committed, because there was some excess revenue from the previous project, that they've committed to helping us in pinpointing the Washington Park property as the location that they're willing to take the spoil pile once it's dried out. I think you know that it's approximately a 2-year process, but we got the report today that in fact the spoil is being dried. It's being set aside. And the question was asked, well, what about permitting? You know, if the Corps had a project and it was going to be to take that spoil and put it somewhere else, wouldn't you be responsible for the permitting aspect of that? Because that's their requirement, that they have to dispose of it. And they said, yeah, we would. That would have to be part of the project. So we're making good progress. I will tell you, I also initiated a discussion, and I did tell Mr. Hunsaker his name was brought up at our port meeting this morning, because obviously we wear Port Authority hats, and then we also wear County Commission hats. And a park, such as what you've been requesting, and is in the capital improvement project as a project of record, a park would be a county project. So where Army Corps is gonna take it so far, the county's gonna have to pick it up and take it from there. So we talked about it briefly at our meeting, and said that we're looking for a project manager so that this project of record can continue to move forward. And as we go through the CIP process, that we will look for revenues, because they're not identified yet, and you understand that. But that's where getting a project manager and making sure that we're ready when the Army Corps is ready to move that dirt, and we have a plan that can be implemented. So that's what we're working on. Just wanted to give you that update. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you so much.
To add to that, as indicated, this is a proposal, is a project of record. To take a project from record and put it in the capital improvement program requires two things: a dollar amount and a schedule. And we're working diligently on both of those in order to do the budget amendment or the amendment to the capital improvement program to move it from project of record into the capital improvement program. And we believe that in this fiscal year, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we will have the dollar amount and the dates that this will start taking place. Because the capital improvement program is a multi-year document. So as the chair of the port indicated to you, it might be a couple of years before the dirt starts moving. That's okay. We can still move it into the capital improvement program in fiscal year 19 or fiscal year 2020. We just need to know the dates that the Corps is going to do the moving of the dirt and how much it's going to cost. And those are within.
How much dirt we need, because that's a big part of the
The
core
engineering,
question is,
right, how
you know,
much?
because, I mean, they have a huge amount of dirt, and how much dirt do we need? And that's got to be part of the equation.
I think the indications today are there's more of a hole than there is dirt.
Right, that's what I heard.
Yes.
But how much of the hole can we fill up with the dirt? We're working on that part.
And phasing the project, that possibly.
Well, with the new drone projects, we were able to get a drone over there and look at it.
Oh, wow, cool.
Get some deep holes.
Some very deep holes.
So,
Just one other thing, 29th Street, 30th Street on the lighting,
Yes.
we're still waiting on that as well. With the 0.5% tax, hopefully we can get some new lighting in those dark corners
On the
to
list.
slow down the drug traffic. That's another subject, but
Yeah, another-
we've discussed that before as
And
well.
Reverend, please spread the word, of how important that is to help us get that done, because
Yes.
we really want to move forward. And I just want to add one more thing. I would have to tell you also that, as you know, Commissioner Bussell is going to be leaving us here in November, but I can tell you that today at the port, he's the one that initially brought up those 88 acres. And he looked over at me, he sits next to me in the port, and he looked over at me and he said, "I'm going to make sure that gets done, and you'd better follow through."
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Just
you,
so you
Commissioner
know,
Russell.
he's,
He's been a friend, he's been a friend a long time.
yes, he is.
Vanessa.
Going to miss him terribly.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Vanessa,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Livingston, I always, I'm sorry, because I know it's Pastor Livingston, but I know Pastor Livingston is Mr. Livingston. I always tell everybody since 1977, so we go back probably even longer than probably everybody up here. He was my nursing supervisor at Manatee Hospital, and when you said that you had to sneak over to get to the hospital, I knew exactly what you were talking about.
Bridge.
So, anyway, so I'm so glad that our lives touched again here.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
And the sheriff never caught me.
Sheriff never caught you. Good.
Still looking for you.
He could run faster.
All right, let's see. Mike Meehan?
Just a couple of clarification questions.
And please state your name for the record.
Mike Meehan, private citizen. Just a couple of clarification questions on the pie chart that was shown here. Which one of these segments of the pie is the sales tax revenue part?
The sales tax referendum that you're talking about on the
No, the
ballot?
sales tax that is remitted back to Manatee County from the state of Florida.
Oh, that state share.
The state, it's in the under the revenue pie chart.
That's the sales
It would be
tax.
the state, federal, and local. We're receiving that the half-cent sales tax, not to be confused with the one that's gonna go on the ballot, that comes through the state. So that's in the intergovernmental section.
School.
52.9.
52.9%.
It's
It looks
52
like-
million at
Got it.
9%.
So, yeah, 9%.
Okay, 9%
9%,
of the
okay,
budget.
I just wondered. So the property taxes do represent
14.
35%, and the charges for service, 36%, and licenses and so forth, okay.
Yes.
My next question relates, I've been attending the Health Advisory Board meetings, and I have addressed the commissioners at hearings they've held on that subject. My question is, within this budget, how much is allocated to healthcare expenditures, the dollar figure, and what percent of that is mandatory spending for healthcare, and what percent of that is non-mandatory spending, which could be used to address the issue of medical care for the medically needy? Does anyone know that?
Not off the top of my head. We don't have that data in this room. We can send that to you.
Yeah, I think I have an email. I sent an email like that to someone who asked the same question, so I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, we will be happy to forward it. I'll be happy to forward it to you.
It's not.
That's a level of detail we don't have this evening here.
So I would provide my email and you would send that to us?
Have it.
Yes.
Is that how it works? You don't know just roughly off the top of your head, do you? Total healthcare budget and what percent is mandatory versus non-mandatory?
$22 million in total?
Yeah. And 11?
Why don't you
Ms.
come
Ms.
forward?
Winden, if you'd like to come down and share your,
Get on record.
The health care queen?
Yes.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Mr. Hunzucker, in rough numbers, it's about $22 million, about 12 of that, 11 of that is mandatory costs, the other is the discretionary. We'll provide Mr. Meehan with the detail on that as soon as we get in the office tomorrow morning.
Good.
if you would be so kind as to get his email address.
She has
Oh.
it. I told you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike's.
Oh, by the way, excellent work on your budget. I
Thank
can
you.
see that you all put a lot of work into it, and it looks very good, very professional.
We don't hear that very often. Thank you.
That's true.
From a businessman, he is.
From a businessman.
He was.
Yeah.
from- yep.
Catherine Edwards. I am freezing. Is it cold?
Wish. Ooh, finally feel cool down.
It's cold.
It's so hot out there.
Good evening. How are you?
Good.
Cold.
Always.
Cold in here.
Feels good to me.
Catherine Edwards. I'd like to first respond to some of Commissioner Benek's comments at the beginning this evening with respect to reserve funds. When reserve funds are considered as revenue, it permits a legal fiction to continue as state legislators intended. Thank you. With respect to the budget that was presented, it's management by budget. When you have a sheriff's department that has 3 helicopters and only owns up to 2 of them, that's management by budget. When you have a sheriff's office that refuses to make available to a public a budget broken down by accounting units because it's pure fiction, as quoted by Tom Salisbury, that's management by budget. the Clerk of Circuit Court. It has a database that it makes available for public access, but it precludes time and space analysis by the public, which prevents the public from monitoring government actions and spending. That's management by budget. Human resources. 4% average pay raise is proposed. Yet human resources can't even provide a list of job positions and the benefits that employees in each of those positions elected. That's management by budget. When you have multiple human resources departments for the constitutionals and the county, and you have multiple payrolls for the constitutionals and the taxpayers, the county departments, that's management by budget. Finally,
Okay, Catherine?
Finally, taxpayers don't need management by budget. Taxpayers do need management by data analysis taxpayers do need management by efficiencies realized through data analysis and consolidation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If anyone else from the public would like to come forward and speak on the budget, please do so. Just state your name for the record, please, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Kathleen Grant. I think that the discussion with respect to the budget is more than a semantic one. The county administrator tonight said that we do not have a deficit budget, but on August 2nd, he said we have deficit spending. And I'd like to quote what the county administrator said at the August 2nd budget reconciliation meeting. Quote, "Current revenues do not fund current spending. It's as if you took home $100 a week and spent $116, eating into your savings account. At some point, you have to stop doing that because the savings account will go away. We have to get to a point where current revenues support current revenues," unquote. So as far as I'm concerned, we do have deficit spending, even if we have a balanced budget. The other point I'd like to question regarding the budget, and again, this relates to the 4% salary increase provided for in this budget. It's another semantic issue. Certain commissioners continue to claim that there is no, quote, across the board 4% salary increase. This statement, in my opinion, is too clever by half. While every employee may not receive a 4% salary increase, as the administrator stated again at the August 2nd meeting, quote, "Every entity that is funded by the BOCC will receive 4% of their compensation to distribute however they choose." To me, in plain English, this is a 4% salary increase for every department, and the public has not been provided with any justification as to why this is 4% for the third year in a row, or why it is the same for all departments. Thank you.
Yes, Linda, come on.
Good evening, Linda Neely, citizen. I asked questions at the last meeting last Thursday, and I got no answers. And tonight I listened to you talk to everyone practically who came to this podium, and you answered their questions. I called Ms. Brewer And I first started with Candy, which I guess is an assistant, and it became contentious. And Ms. Brewer misquoted the law. And when we have a county administrator who says to a citizen, you want a public records request, you put it in writing. That is not what the state of Florida Sunshine Law says.
You're right, it's not.
It is not. But that is the protocol that I get from your departments. And when we're spending our money, and there's a transparency law in Florida specifically designed to make you all be transparent with us. It's a trim notice hearing tonight, truth and millage. How are you taxing us, and how are you going to spend our money? You have a 1 point something budget. There's a $854 million savings account called the investment portfolio. For 4 months, I have tried to find where that money came from, how it's dispersed, what year did those monies come from. One of the accounts is Fifth Third Bank. You deposited $8 million with Fifth Third Bank in 2013. It has accrued 0.65% interest. My son has more money than I have, and his little CD draws more interest than 0.65. You deposited, and I know you don't do it, that's the clerk's job, but it only accrued 0.65, and it's been there for 3 years. This is 2016. It matures this month on the 30th. So it's not money that comes and goes all day long in the county. You know, at some point, these have starting dates, and they have maturity dates, and they have yields of interest. They're not monies you're going to get next week from Susie Smith at the utility department. They're monies you took out of something. Now, you say your reserve is only 20%. Your budget is $560 million. That means roughly $110 million in reserves. There's $177 million in grants and transfers that you list in there, and that adds up to roughly about $9 million. Where's the other $500 million? Just be honest with us for one time. Just one time, you all could be honest with us about our money. In the past, Mr. Hunziker has said he's presented a 2-year budget. This is the first year that he says he's only presenting a 1-year budget. And I think that we deserve the answers. And the trim notice declares that we shall get the answers. I've been informed I need to write another public records request and bounce back to the clerk's department. I cannot get the information from this county. And I think there's something morally wrong with that. And I would hope you would answer your own public records request. The clerk may invest it, but you certainly have the answers, and you have reports that you could provide. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public like to come forward and speak this evening? Not seeing anyone, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Commissioner Benak.
I am not an accountant. I think we need to make this more simple. Catherine Edwards said that, and I can't quote her exactly, but when reserve funds are considered as revenue, this somehow is confusing, and that's not exactly what she said, but she implied that was causing problems, and I want to be entirely clear about this, because people need to understand when we talk about the problem going forward, and this is the way that I look at it. We've had a budget stabilization fund that was money that was set aside during the good times. To me, that would be my savings account. I'm going to compare it to what I have. I have a savings account. So my daughter got married last March. Guess what? I tapped that savings account. I didn't go into deficit spending because I had to tap into my savings account. And I believe this is the same thing we're doing here. We have tapped into our savings account to make sure that we're covering all of the demands. We know going forward that savings account is going to be depleted. We have said that publicly, 2018, the Budget Stabilization Fund that has been presented is going to be drawn down. So what will happen? We will have to, in the future, cut our expenses without additional revenues. Am I getting it? Please
doing a
help me.
great
I
job.
am not an accountant, but I do balance the budget at home. So is this correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it isn't deficit spending. I think the confusion is the word reserves. We have a 20% reserve that is not touched at all, will continue to be there. But the budget stabilization fund that was put away during the good times is being drawn down. And just for the fun of it, I've heard that we spent the corpus from the sale of the hospital. Pretty sure that was spent considerably before I got elected in 2012. That's why we tried to come up with a way to replenish that. That money's gone. And that money was gone before I got elected. It was on its way out as of 2008 when they started spending all of the corpus down.
That's right.
So that's been one of the hits to our budget stabilization fund. We don't have a source of revenue for the health care that we just talked about that's being paid for. It's coming out in part out of property taxes. I don't have any desire to make this confusing. My desire is to make it as clear as possible. But I'm not an accountant, so I'm going to turn it over to the county administrator. And, there were questions about, the pay raise. I think we've been clear on that.
Doesn't matter.
Yes.
And then net budget.
Doesn't
But,
matter.
I'll be glad to try to be as clear as possible, and I don't see any problem with, if you can, answering Ms. Neely's questions.
The challenge with the last speaker is a understanding of finance and budgeting. You are dealing with a budget. Budgets are a series of estimates. We estimate what the money will be left over at the end of this year. We estimate the revenues we'll collect next year. We're estimating expenditures based on your authorizations. The amount of cash that we have available is not a budget issue. That's a financial statement. That's your balance sheet, if you understand balance sheets. That's on the upper left-hand corner of a balance sheet. The first thing you'll find under assets is cash. We don't deal with cash in a budget. We deal with estimated revenues and estimated expenses. The closest thing we come to cash is when you add up all of the expected money to be left over at the end of this year in all of those 150 funds. You add all those together and you come up with the estimated cash balance. It will be somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 700 to 800 million. But to say you could spend any of that on anything you want, that's just not a true statement. A fund that had bought an investment in 2013 and the money is still there, certainly there's a number of those. The one that comes to mind the most is there's a requirement for a post-closure fund on the landfill.
Right.
And every year you need to put money in that fund to assure the Environmental Protection Agency of the federal government, the state of Florida, and the bondholders that lend us the money to build that facility, that we will close it in a prudent way, that it's not going to harm the environment. And so you put that money away every year. It is going to stay there for another 25 years or so that we have in the remaining life of the landfill, and we will add to it every year. And you can't take money out of it. It will stay there. That's just one fund. We have bond funds that we borrow money, and part of the financial reason you have a AAA bond rating is one of the requirements typically in a bond issue is you have a debt service reserve fund in an amount of money that equals 1 year's principal and interest. And you set that aside year one. If you wait 30 years to pay off that debt, that money will sit there for 30 years. You can't touch it. Well, if you did, your bond rating wouldn't be a AAA rated bond issue. So there are dollars that will sit in some of these funds for a long, long time. you can't spend it. And part of the problem the last speaker was having was chatting with staff and mixing funds and mixing financial statements with budget statements. And so I would assume they said, put your request in writing because you're not making sense with the questions you're asking. You can't take cash and try and find it in a budget document. And to say you can take any of that money and move it from fund to fund to fund, can't do that. And so they were having, and as you know, the clerk of the circuit court is the chief financial officer of this county. And the head of the finance function under the clerk of the circuit court was on the phone with Jan today trying to answer questions of the last speaker. They couldn't get through the concepts, and that's where things got testy. And I might add, I have directed my staff that you don't have to take abuse on the telephone. If you take abuse on the phone, you can hang up. You can say, we don't have to listen to that.
Well, she was at the last one, too.
But we take a lot of heat when we're trying to answer questions, but we do our darndest to comply with the public records law.
I knew there had to be something because I know, we all know that you can't ask someone to put it in writing. So I knew that there had to be something.
But after Jan's staff tried to explain it, after Jan got on the phone with Dan Wolfson and tried to explain it, and they weren't getting anywhere because it kept moving around, finally was, we're not getting anywhere. Put down in writing what you want and we'll answer your question in writing. Or they'd still be on the phone now.
Okay. Exactly. Commissioner Whitmore.
And I don't know what John and them did, but when I gave directive, and I see Zach Anino here, but when I was mayor, if a resident is not respectful to an employee, my employees were given direction by me that tell them that they were going to hang up now and they would call back when everything settled down and they can all work together peaceably. And, you know, I want to thank Mr. Meehan being here today because he asked good questions, he wanted answers, and he was respectful. And you weren't yelling or angry, and, you know, hopefully, you know, some people wouldn't talk to their family members like that. You know, we're all here doing a job, so, Mr. Meehan, I appreciate the way you handled your professionalism up here. It was mentioned that Ed didn't present, it's supposed to be a 2-year budget, and he only presented in 1 year.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's because this is the second year of that 2-year budget. And I saw a lot of people smiling in the audience because we all know that. So this year is the second year of that budget. That's why you only see 1 year. So, you know, let's all, again, I said this last meeting, I'm going to say it every time. We all got a job to do. The public has every right to come up here and say, you know, but we do have a civility pledge up here, and I would appreciate it if we all be professional. And not one person that came up tonight, except I think maybe I've talked to Mr. Meehan, he's called me. Not one person that came up tonight has ever asked to meet with me. It's only on camera. So I would appreciate if anybody, no, Ms. Grant, you've never asked to meet with me. So if anybody would like to, please call tomorrow and I'll be glad to meet with you. But I will not sit here and get yelled at, even in my office. We will all treat each other with respect or I won't meet with you. And that's it. I'm a person just like everybody else. That's all.
Madam Chair, one more thing. Every year, we have an audit. Every dollar that you spend is audited by an independent third party. We're also subject to audits by the clerk of the circuit court on special issues. And this budget is presented in a format that gets reviewed by the Department of Revenue of the state of Florida. It's dictated how we do it by them. If we didn't follow the rules of the state of Florida, well, as I said earlier, and another time in another place, we wound up doing it all over again. They will review how we do what we do and the budget that's before you. And it all passes muster every year. Thank you.
Well, I don't have any other commissioners on the board. There is a couple of things I want to bring up, though. I think we all received a letter out here when we got up to the dais this afternoon about the road to nowhere. We're all familiar with this. And I believe it is actually in the CIP, it's just not funded. Is that
Nope.
correct, Ed? Am I right on that?
It's in the CIP.
Right.
That means it's funded.
It's funded?
Yeah, once it's in the CIP.
That's what the letter says too, by the way.
Yeah,
It's kind
it
of- I had to
does.
read it real quick too, because the
He's,
first
I
time I
think,
saw
making
it.
sure
Yeah, I
we don't
hadn't
take
seen
it
it
out.
The letter is
Oh.
kind of just saying thank you, if I read it correctly.
This is in the
It's in there. I don't even know why you wrote the letter, because
I
it's
don't
already in
either.
there.
Okay, I missed it. I thought it was in the CIP, but I didn't think it was funded.
If it's in the CIP, it's funded, right?
It might be one of those projects that is in the 150 project list
That's not what the letter's saying.
that if the sales passes, this road would get built.
Right, right.
This isn't in your currently
Thank you.
proposed CIP that you will be adopting tonight.
And that's not what this letter
well,
says,
then
by
I
the
might
way.
have
He's,
messed up.
he's asking us not to forget the road to nowhere.
It'll go somewhere someday.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that, because it is an important road, especially with the Fort Hamer Bridge, almost getting completed in another year, so that's important. And then I do have one more question, Ed.
It's also an important road for the new high school because
Yes, that's true.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, that's
Parish.
right, it's right there.
help refresh my memory, please. When I got this information this afternoon from Debbie on the CRAs, FY16 projected 817,000 for South County. I don't recall that. What is that? What is that for?
that was money that when the CRA was disbanded was in that fund.
Right.
It's still,
And we disbanded the CRA and the fund, and at the board's direction, we took that money and moved it into an account within the general fund.
oh, so this just means that it's been moved to another account.
It's in the
Okay.
general fund, and you committed to continue to fund all the programs that were being
We're doing it
funded.
at the time.
Yes.
We committed to
And
that.
so you can see there that there's an adequate amount of money to continue to fund all those projects for quite some time. And the board's commitment was that when this money runs out, the money that's in the Southwest Tax Increment Financing Fund would continue to fund those expenses.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because it says expenditures. So I'm thinking it's money that's been spent on something, is what I was thinking. So that's why I was curious.
The list.
Well, the expenditures, that's for, well,
It says
it
expenditures.
should be perhaps expenditures/budget because it's the actual expenditures in 15. What we think the actual expenditures in 16 were going to be, and then we have projected tentative what's in the budget for 17.
Well, it was such a larger amount, and I couldn't remember us spending that much money on anything.
Here, there's one for everyone.
I was gonna say, I don't have this information either.
It was emailed.
It was
to
emailed late this
everyone
afternoon.
This afternoon.
Yeah.
We haven't
brought
been
it
to our
today.
emails, so, okay,
I just
sorry about
happened
that.
I was working in my office, that's why I saw it.
The first top of it is
Oh,
a
you printed it?
request for comparison of
Having a heart
revenue.
attack when you said 800,000
Well,
in the
that's
CRA,
why-
and I knew we had over 2 million.
Yeah,
so-
that's why I brought it up, because it says expenditure, and
0.7.
I didn't know what we had spent it on either.
Yeah, we
so.
did a lot of sidewalks, streetlight projects. We fund the sheriff's office, extra policing, road
Yeah, but we do
gang.
that every year as far
Yeah,
as the
yeah.
sheriff's
CRA,
office and all
that's
that.
part
It's
of
not
it.
870,000. So,
Special project.
yeah. That's why I was asking.
So are we going to have a
In an
list of all the projects?
In an upcoming workshop, Sherry is scheduled to go over the CRA business and the Southwest TIF
I-
and give you,
I thought someone would
That
have
was
brought
just
it up. That's
canceled?
why I
Wasn't that meeting just canceled?
went ahead and did it.
I think it's going to be rescheduled. It was scheduled for Tuesday, and we want to make sure there's a full board there, but it'll be in the next month or so.
Okay.
All right, well, I don't have anyone else on the board, so Jan, you want to go over the millage rate comparison, so we can go ahead and start with the resolutions?
I already have, but I can do it again.
She has done that,
So
she
we
did
keep
that
it-
previously. At this point, it would be the motion to adopt Resolution B-17-004, setting the final millage rates for FY 16-17, as Jan indicated earlier.
So moved.
Okay.
We have
Chappie. It's his
a
last
motion by
budget.
Commissioner Chappie and a second by Commissioner Benak. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. It is approved. Yay.
The next item we would ask is a resolution for the final Manatee County budget. And that would be a motion to adopt Resolution B-17-005, the annual budget for Manatee County.
I move that motion.
Second. Oh,
We have a motion by Commissioner Bustle, second by Commissioner Chappie. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
All opposed, nay. It is approved unanimously.
Third action we would request is adoption of a resolution for the final budget for Manatee County Dependent Special Districts. We've taken you through those. That would be a motion to adopt Resolution B-17-006, budget for Manatee County Dependent Special Taxing Districts.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Benek, second by Commissioner Chappie. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. It is approved unanimously.
The last request is this is the Capital Improvement Program. This is adopt Resolution R-16-144 for the Manatee County Capital Improvement Program for fiscal years 2017 through 2021. Let me add that does not include the proposed sales tax revenue. It does include everything we brought you through this year. And again, we would ask you to adopt as CIP.
I think that one of you two, it's your
So
last
moved.
budget.
You do it,
Oh,
as you
wait.
go. Chappie?
Go ahead. It's your
Someone-
last budget.
So moved.
You're gonna do it. She
I'll
always wants to
move.
tell me what to do.
Here we go. Here we go. Sheriff, we might need
Trying to
you.
be respectful and
I'm
nice
just
to you.
teasing.
Commissioner Bustle, would you like to make that motion?
Yeah, I move to adopt resolution R-16-144.
Thank you. Second?
Yes,
Someone? I can't do
second.
it. Thank you.
Don't you dare.
We have a motion by Commissioner Bustle, second by Commissioner Chappie. Discussion, Commissioner Benek.
Yeah, and we know we've got a Parks Master Plan coming.
Yes.
Where we're going to be looking at projects there. We know we've had requests for road projects, that, I did misread this letter, I think.
Yes, you did.
It was very unclear in this letter, unfortunately. Is it thanking us for doing it, or does it need to be
No.
done?
I knew it wasn't in
They
there,
wanted
that's
it
why.
completely.
Yeah, okay, I was
That's his
unclear,
way.
so, yeah.
And it's 14 miles.
Yeah, so, and, you know,
2 million a mile.
but this thing is possible, depending on the revenues available, could change, obviously.
You have the right to amend this capital improvement program anytime during the year you wish in a public hearing.
Right.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure, and we also know about Washington Park, that's
Yes.
coming up, and we're going to be putting together a schedule for that, so,
A schedule and a budget and amend the CIP to include it in.
okay, thank you.
All right, so we have a motion to adopt Resolution R-16-144. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. It is approved unanimously.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
I would
sir.
like to thank at this time Jan and her staff
Yeah.
for their diligent work.
Where's Debbie?
There's a half a
Debbie's
dozen.
home tonight. Yeah,
Everybody did a good job.
thank you.
When I was in Hillsborough, they had over 30 people in the budget office. We do at 30 with 6 people,
6?
Can I ask a
7. How much?
question?
And in Hillsborough, they did it with 30?
Well, let's see, today we have
There's only 3 out
4
there
here.
tonight.
That shows you.
Ed, we might have an issue here.
Madam Chair?
What about resolution number 1602, the housing
Yeah, that is not listed on the
Housing
sheet.
Finance Authority of Manatee County, Florida? It's in here, but
We weren't going there.
is that,
to it, isn't it?
is
not
that,
for
is that all it
tonight's
is?
That
should be in
It's an
that-
exhibit
it's-
one.
that
That
That's
should be in
exhibit
the
one.
dependent
Exhibit.
special districts,
Yeah,
because
it's
there's a
number
list
2.
of all of them in
It's
dependent
exhibit
special
one. I
districts.
see that now. Sorry.
God, you made me nervous.
Commissioner Bustle, yes, sir.
Well, we thank the finance department, but I'll tell you, when you stop and think of all the effort and devotion that the departments put into reviewing and presenting to us their decision units, I think we'd really reach out to them and thank them for a great job.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you. We will share that.
Have them have to walk home without getting their dreams fulfilled, but, someday we'll take care of them.
Thank you, sir.
Totally agree. At this time, too, the chair just wants to say that, Betsy and I have been up here for 4 years. I mean, we have others that have been up here longer. And this occurs to me that it's going to be the last budget meeting with Commissioner Bustle and Commissioner Chappie. And I just want to say it's been a pleasure working on this budget with the two of you, and hard to believe you won't be here for it next year, so.
They can come back.
Come in the audience.
He's the oldest one up here.
Might be requesting.
Oh, my
some-
Here
gosh.
before he was here before the beaches.
We're not gonna let you forget that one,
And you
Chad.
know,
Dirt
I'm glad you brought that up because
I
when he
hate to
said
say
it,
that.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
before the beach renourishment.
I don't know how old Priscilla is,
Key
but
word
I
was
might be
missing.
the oldest up here
Yeah.
on the
She's
dais.
younger than us. She's
Oh, that's right,
Betsy's
you are a
age.
little older than me.
I am.
Whew.
I'm a couple months older.
Okay, she's May.
I think I got you beat.
I forgot about that.
I'm
She's
the
August,
old
I'm
one.
October.
They have
As
to
long as
look
we're
it
still
up.
pretty, right?
That's
All
right.
that matters. That's all that matters. All right, well, not seeing anybody else on the board. We have our budget ratified, so we're in good shape. This meeting is adjourned.
Here, here.